Welcome back, lovely listeners, to the Real Stickman Podcast,
Woohoo!
Episode 4.
Gosh, and if you're a Star Wars fan, episode 4 is the best one, so.
This is the one we should have started with.
This was one we should have started with. It would have been Sleepless in Seattle, A New Hope. Which, also, segueing into, that is the reveal of our title, which you probably already saw by clicking on the video, but still.
Right, yeah, it was probably in the link to this video.
You probably had an idea beforehand. But that's okay. Now you've heard it. You've heard the truth.
The title's so nice, we got to reveal it twice.
Boom. It's like the opening to Terminator Salvation. You put the titles twice. Don't watch that movie.
I've forgotten about that movie. Thanks for bringing that up.
Bad times at the cinema. It's like there was that period when we were still teenagers and we still believed movie trailers. We still got hyped for movies based on a trailer. Now I'm just like, I'm skeptical. I'm an old crotchety man watching from my front porch. It'll never fly.
Although I gotta say, with the past year being locked in my house, I get excited for movie trailers again.
It's something from the outside world.
Yeah, I think, like I was talking to you the other day, I saw the trailer for Mortal Kombat, which normally wouldn't really be on my radar. Now I'm like, this looks kind of fun, because I just haven't seen a trailer for an action movie in that many months.
It's like we're imagining what it would be like to be outside at a movie theater with friends having fun.
It's what I dream about now.
Do Ben's dream of electric sheep? So today's movie, Sleepless in Seattle.
Yes.
A classic 90s gem, very heavily favored by the critics at the time, as well as a lot of people since. It had a history that sort of helped kick off a new age of romantic comedies. When Harry Met Sally came first, but this one is the one that sort of, it seems people hold as sort of the staple of what romantic comedies became for a new wave, let's say.
Yeah, it was certainly among the more commercially successful, I think. They kind of came in with that new wave with When Harry Met Sally. Mm-hmm. But certainly did well for itself, both critically and commercially. And yeah, here we are, however many years later, talking about it. Must have done something right.
Well, I mean, the Hindenburg did. We're still talking about it years later, so.
So, I mean, no spoilers yet. It could have done something wrong as well.
So the movie stars acclaimed cast of well-known. It's not really as popular nowadays, all of them. Tom Hanks is still up there, but he's our lead male. And then Meg Ryan is our female protagonist.
Yeah, Meg Ryan, of course, was America's sweetheart at the time. Well, was it her or Julia Roberts?
Well, Julia Roberts was literally in the movie American Sweethearts.
Oh, okay, so she was the sweetheart. Meg Ryan was something, though. She was
Meg Ryan was America's Girl Next Door.
in a lot of rom-coms in the 90s, and I remember seeing her on all kinds of movie trailers and video boxes at the video store and stuff, and then she just kind of disappeared.
Yeah, I don't know if that was like motherhood or just the offers started drying up or the world just moved on.
Yeah, maybe she wanted to make a change in her life. I don't know. It's
well, we were talking about Joseph Gordon-Levitt and like why did he drop off the radar, and we realized through internet research that was around the same time he had kids.
Right, yeah. Sometimes they just want to, go deal with their families. There's got to be a nicer word for that.
Celebrities move in mysterious ways. Who else is in this movie? We've got Bill Pullman, and then Rosie O'Donnell.
A couple more great '90s actors.
Yeah, and then smaller roles from Victor Garber and Rita Wilson. Rita Wilson is Tom Hanks' in real life wife. I honestly haven't seen her in much of anything else.
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of lots of little cameos isn't quite the right word. Like they got Rob Reiner, who is more famous as a director, and he directed When Harry Met Sally, so there's another link there. Got like David Hyde Pierce, who was
right.
Yeah, Niles on Frasier, but lots of little pop-ins. But the core crew is Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan, Bill Pullman, and Rosie O'Donnell. I think.
Yeah.
The main ones, right? Yeah.
So, you want to hit us with a brief synopsis for this thing, Ben?
Yes. So, Tom Hanks is Sam.
Oh, emphasis on brief, because you remember my last synopsis.
Sam is a recently widowed father of one who, mourning the loss of his wife, decides to make a change and move from
Chicago, I think.
Chicago, I think it was, yeah, to Seattle, the titular Seattle. And there he just
The one
tries
mentioned in the title, right?
yeah, they said the name of the movie.
Oh, that's why they call it that.
And when he's there, he just kind of, tries to raise his son and eventually get back into the dating scene. So on New Year's Eve, his son calls into a radio show.
You know, that took me back to, so David Hyde Pierce was on the show Frasier, right? Mm-hmm. And Frasier was about a psychologist on the radio, which I don't know if that's really much of a thing anymore, but it was big in the 90s, early 2000s. Do you remember there's a Dr. Laura Lessinger? She was on the radio all the time when we were kids.
Yeah, kind of, maybe not her specifically, but I remember there being shows like that on the radio. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the title comes from Tom Hanks' son calling into one of those radio shows on New Year's Eve. And then as those type of radio doctors would essentially put a catchy title on the case, Tom Hanks is referred to as Sleepless in Seattle.
Yes, he has trouble sleeping since the loss of his wife, and
he's in Seattle.
He's in Seattle, yeah. He talks to this radio doctor, which is then broadcast out across the nation, and that's where we get to Meg Ryan, who hears this conversation over the radio and kind of falls in love with the story, with Tom Hanks's character's story. And then her story is that she slowly falls more and more in love with the idea of him, eventually trying to track him down, to meet him.
And that's pretty much it. I mean, he's just trying to get back into the dating game, but we really don't pay a lot of attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the plot of the film. It's pretty simple, straight and forward.
It's surprisingly straightforward, and it's an interesting film too, because the two leads don't interact all that much in the film.
They say hi like once, halfway through the movie.
Yeah.
And then they see each other again at like the end.
At the end. It's interesting they were able to develop a commercially successful romantic comedy where the two leads do not interact with each other hardly at all, which I think is just a testament to the humor and the performances in the film, as well as people's enjoyment of magic and romance in films.
Yeah. It's enough to carry it.
Mm.
So, opening thoughts. I didn't enjoy this movie.
And that's okay. We can still be friends.
Yes. You all can hate me. So I first watched this film probably, I don't know, I don't want to say 10 years ago. It was a while ago, though. Mm. And I was sort of just going through a phase of watching rom-coms. And I pretty much hit all of the big ones from like the last half a century. And, You've Got Mail. I love When Harry Met Sally. I've rewatched that one like 2 or 3 times. So that one's one I go back to a lot. Because I like the interpersonal relationships and the connection in that way. And so what I did not like about this one is, as far as rom-coms go, there is no interpersonal relationship between the two leads.
Right.
Because it's all imaginary.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of friendship connection between, say, Tom Hanks and Rob Reiner, who plays like one of his best friends, and Meg Ryan and Rosie O'Donnell, who's also one of her best friends. But there's just not, the characters themselves don't meet. And so for me, most of the reason why I go to a rom-com, or why I would watch one, is kind of gone.
Yeah, I can absolutely see why this film wouldn't be for everybody. I grew up with this film. I enjoy it quite a bit. But I don't... Looking at it now, it shouldn't work. And, having watched it with you now, I realize it doesn't work for some people. This is not really a romance in the traditional sense of what we think of a romance film. It's a film about romantic comedies. It's almost observational in how it plays out, of like looking at the tropes of romantic comedies and how people... Go ahead.
Well, it's not even real observation, though, in the modern sense of, like, say, 22 Jump Street, just as a random example. It makes a lot of jokes at sort of, this is where the action sequence is supposed to happen, and the characters are kind of aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
And they have meta-narrative where they actually poke fun at it, and everything's more expensive now, because it's the sequel. So they're underhandedly saying the movie's more expensive, on top of the characters living in a more expensive sort of area.
Mm.
So this isn't that meta in that sense. It doesn't poke at the fact that it's a romantic comedy all the time.
You're right. It doesn't make it's not the meta in the sense that we think of meta nowadays. Maybe not. Maybe meta's not even the right word for it, because in the end, I personally believe it does make reference to some tropes here and there in a very subtle way. It ends up just kind of playing into them by the end. So it's not sitting there trying to make a statement about anything. I think I'm not really sure what this film was trying to say, if anything.
Yeah, like it's aware of, like, one of the primary things it does is it references the Cary Grant movie Unfair to Remember.
Yes,
All the characters watch it, and all of the women in the movie love that film.
Mm-hmm.
And the guys either kind of like it or are indifferent to it.
Mm-hmm.
There is an awareness of rom-coms, but maybe not modern ones. I haven't a lot of experience with old rom-coms. Like, I've seen a Philadelphia Story with Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart and Katharine Hepburn.
Mm.
But maybe there's a language there that they are speaking of knowing all of those films that we don't have.
Maybe. You're right. It's not referencing its peers or even probably the direct previous generation of romantic comedies.
Yeah, not its contemporaries and not the last group it aged out of. Mm-hmm. But sort of the general idea that maybe the Cary Grant movie
like
seems
from
to speak
50s to. And back. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's sort of almost played up by the soundtrack as well. There's an awful lot of what sounds like almost lounge music or 50s big band kind of things.
Like a lot of things that could be easy listening music by modern standards. You throw it in an elevator take out the vocals and which leads to something I mentioned is this movie seems to be leisurely soothing.
Yes, yeah.
Like you mentioned, what was it, an argument that Annie, Meg Ryan's character, and Bill Pullman's character, they could have had and just skips right over them?
Yes. Yeah, this film is fluffy might be the right word. There's not an awful lot of conflict. Actually, let's delve into their relationship.
All right, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, so Meg Ryan's character, Annie, is engaged to Bill Pullman's character, Walter. And their relationship is portrayed as a little bit safe or plain. I don't know, how would you describe?
Safe or plain or good, settling.
Yeah, that's a good word for it.
That's the impression that you get from her. But meanwhile, him, like, you don't see anything sparking crazy romance or anything like that, but he seems happy.
Yeah, you're right. He's not like the kind of guy who'll sweep you off your feet with flowers and fly to the Bahamas for a crazy weekend. But he's funny. He's got a good job. He's sweet and caring, and I know he seems like the good guy, the guy you should go for. He's just not that exciting, I guess. He is portrayed specifically to look a little bit buffoon-like here and there.
Yeah, like a bit of a schmuck. Like,
yes, yeah.
He's got allergies up the wazoo, so he's allergic to everything.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a joke that they play up. When he's sleeping, he has to have all these pills and meds, so there's like no sexy romance when they're going to bed.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're talking about the wedding, he talks about all the things that they can't do because of his allergies.
Right.
But
yeah.
It's not even her that's objecting to them. It's her family that keep bringing these things up that they should do.
Yeah.
That he says that we can't do.
And that's interesting too. Is there's nothing she really dislikes about Walter. She's just not in love with him. And I think she comes to kind of realize that.
And yet they're living together. She says yes to getting married to him. And she's like, well, when she talks, it's like either she's enthused or she's convincing herself she's enthused. But it's like, it's just kind of like she's like, I don't know, I'm kind of done. And then she leaves him.
She definitely is sounding like she's enthused. I think that's a big plot of the film, and she's trying to convince herself that she's in love with Walter and not in love with the voice of a man she met on the radio. That's a big point. Her and Rosie O'Donnell will go over that. Is that she's kind of falling in love with this fantasy, this idea of romance. She's got a perfectly good relationship, healthy state. Well, healthy's maybe a strong word now that we realize she's pining after some man on the radio. But
he's healthy.
Yeah, it was otherwise good relationship in front of her. And I don't know what that says about Meg Ryan's character. If I don't think she's a bad person, she's just lost the spark, or maybe the spark was never there. Settling is probably the right word, like you said earlier. Like she's just settled for mediocrity, and not even that he's a bad man, but that there's no real spark between them either.
And I could buy that, but in a film where it's more directly stated.
I will give you that one. I noticed by the end that Meg Ryan doesn't, or I guess the character Annie doesn't really have the background character work necessary to make these strange decisions and choices she makes really make sense. She almost feels like she's a stand-in character just for the author's idea or something.
Yeah, well, like I haven't read any, but I worked at a library, so I sorted enough. But like a Danielle Steele or Harlequin novel, where it's about the romantic, lusty cowboy or something like that, and they're the ones with the personality that's been all ramped up and written. And then the female character is essentially something that any woman reading it can put themselves into those shoes and feel like they're there.
Yes.
I mean, I do that with video games sometimes, where I create a character that's kind of like me, and I'm like, yeah, I can swing a lightsaber.
It's about fantasy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I'm gonna talk about that for a moment then, because I think that's what this film is. As much as I do think that in some ways it is making at least meta observations, if not commentary, it ultimately is just a popcorn fantasy.
Oh.
It's fluffy and it's fun and it's cute, and there's no real deeper meaning to it because objectively, yeah, Meg Ryan's characters, the choices she makes don't make a lot of sense. But in the context of a film, she wants to end up with the man for her at the end, and a man she's never met. This romance
Tom
from across
Hanks
the
is
country.
caring, but also manly. He's a single father who's raising a son, has a career, has a beautiful home.
Yeah, I think it works on that fantasy level, and I'll admit that does it for me.
Okay. As you were saying that, I finally pieced together what it is you like about it. Okay, so it is that sort of, would you call it escapist fantasy?
Yes.
Yeah, even as I was talking about the relation I have with certain video games, where I make a male character look like me, so I can imagine I'm in that world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if Sleepless in Seattle is supposed to do that, then now I get it. With just a little bit of commentary on previous iterations of romantic comedies. Not like it's meant to be transcending the boundaries of it, or it's talking about how those don't work or something like that, but it's just sort of addressing them and is aware that they're there and that they exist.
Yeah, you literally just put my thoughts on this film into a nutshell. Actually, that's this film is escapist popcorn fantasy flick with just enough of that meta observation to crack a couple of fun jokes here and there. And to me, it's comfortable. It's like being wrapped up in a warm blanket. This film with just a little bit more. I don't want to say intelligence, but observation than some of its peers. I think. But
Okay.
yeah, I would say also maybe fluffier than some of its peers because there isn't a lot of conflict in this film. Like Annie and Walter do eventually break up, and they're engaged. They just bought a wedding ring, and they break up hours later, and it's the most amicable conversation you could imagine two people in that situation having. So yeah, nothing in this film is realistic.
He's like so okay with her dumping him on Valentine's Day, and they were just going to go register for China. And he's like, hey, I wouldn't want to be something you're settling for.
Which is literally what she's been doing the whole film.
Yeah. And Bill
Yeah.
Pullman, like, it's funny, if you're a romantic comedy fan, in this film he's the schmuck, which he actually does surprisingly well. But then you put him in While You Were Sleeping, and suddenly his brother, the guy who plays his brother in that, is meant to be like the rich, good-looking, $1,000 smile lawyer, and then the guy she ends up really liking is the guy who wears jeans and who works with his hands making carpentry, and that's who Bill Pullman plays in that.
It's like a totally different role for him, and
But it works both ways,
Works
and
both ways.
He can go from being the schmuck every girl settles for to the fantasy that every woman wants.
that's some credible range he's got. By the way, yeah, Sleepless in Seattle is another. Not Sleepless in Seattle. While You Were Sleeping. I always get those two mixed up because they both talk about sleeping.
There's too much sleeping, and they're both rom-coms.
What were they doing in the 90s? They're sleeping all over the place. But
Everyone was just sleeping. Wake up, America.
While You Were Sleeping is also a very good film, though. Yeah.
I would put that one as superior to this one, but so now I get this movie, which actually makes me think if there's a similar type of film that I really enjoy, or that we both enjoyed, that does the same thing of being sort of that fantasy escapism where you can put yourself in as the protagonist, where you feel comforted and secure and nice without being too emotionally, mentally, or morally challenged.
Yeah, nothing about this film is taxing to you as the viewer.
Well, I mean, it was very taxing for me because I was
Well,
bored, but
okay, taxing on your time and I guess attention if it's not engrossing you. Yeah, that's true.
yeah. I could have stand to be taxed a little bit more during this film. Tax me emotionally, please. Give me anything.
Yeah. But so we talked a bit about Meg Ryan and how she's kind of a character. That makes
She
some
was
interesting
written
choices.
and played by an actress, yes.
But Tom Hanks, I think, as far as like playing more of a character with an arc and a heart of the film kind of thing, is probably more the core of the film that carries the story more.
Yes.
Or the emotional heart of the film.
Yeah, the emotional arc, absolutely. Because,
Yeah.
like, he even has a dream sequence of seeing his wife romantically lovely and his heart longing, trying to come to terms with her loss himself. He gets some emotional scenes.
Mm-hmm. He really does.
And then also trying to help his son deal with death, and also the fact that he doesn't have a mommy anymore.
Yeah, Tom Hanks acts opposite a kid for most of this film, and it's great. The kid is great, and they're great
very
together.
Good. Yeah, it's too bad some child actors just aren't able to sort of make it past that stage. But I mean, from my understanding, it's a tough business. So for any kid actor to be able to get through it unscathed seems ridiculous.
Yeah. Hopefully, he's gone on to lead a happy, successful, fulfilling life.
And if that's outside of film, then so be it. That's
So
the
be
important thing. We can get other actors in their teen years.
But the kid is great in this film and gets a lot of the best jokes or one-liners too. I found he struck this interesting balance of like getting some of the better jokes or comebacks in the film, while also still getting to act like a kid or do things that a kid would do. But I never found him irritating, the child actor or the child character.
Yeah, because often that's a very easy thing for the kid to be like the most annoying or worst thing about the film.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like 50% of that is the script, 50% of that is being the child actor who you're just like, oh, just shut up.
Yeah, it's really tough for me to find child actors that I really enjoy.
Haley Joel Osment.
Okay, yeah.
Likeable.
Yeah. They kind of carry the emotional core of the film, Tom Hanks and the kid. And you get to see his adventures in dating, because he does get out there and try to get back
adventure.
into the pool. Yeah, one adventure. He lucks out on the first try, finds a woman who wants to date him again.
Yeah, there's that woman who's sort of, she's kind of pretty, but she's not as pretty as Meg Ryan. And she's nice, but she's not as mentally put together. She's sort of a little bit awkward and has a weird laugh. And so she's treated much like a female version of Walter.
Yes, yeah. Something that Tom Hanks would be settling for, in a sense.
Yeah, it's better than nothing.
Mm-hmm. If this weren't a fantasy, it might be a perfectly healthy relationship. But given that this is a fantasy, he can do better.
Yes. She's the starter kit. Starter for every husband grieving the loss of their wife. Move to foreign city, date a passable woman. I love how there's like so little. Well, okay, that's not true. They do reference his job some more, but like him uprooting and moving thousands of miles away, there's very little work conflict.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, no conflict, right?
Probably my favorite scene of the movie is when he's visiting with his friends Victor Garber and Rita Wilson, and she starts talking about An Affair to Remember and how tearful it is about her, and then the boys, which is a very guy thing to do, it's just like, you remember The Dirty Dozen? Oh, which is a fun war film, and they start crying over. Oh, and you remember when Lee Marvin put those grenades down the Germans, those stovepipes in the German house? Oh, and how he died as he was parachuting down, and they had to do the mission without him.
That is also my favorite scene of the film. It's
Well, there you go.
It's very, very well done, very funny, and kind of heartwarming too. When she realizes that, yeah, maybe they don't see her romantic comedies the way she does, or An Affair to Remember the way she does. But
now, I've seen The Dirty Dozen, and you've seen An Affair to Remember.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, not essential viewing for this film at all.
No.
But I would recommend A Dirty Dozen, as it's a fun war film of its era that's definitely a guy's movie.
And I cannot personally recommend An Affair to Remember. It wasn't too bad, but I found the ending to be wildly unbelievable. And I don't know why that film in particular was chosen for this film that all women hold on a pedestal in Sleepless in Seattle. But
I mean, did all women hold it on a pedestal back in the 90s?
I don't know. No one I've ever talked to has seen this film.
I think my mom saw it and she wasn't a fan of it.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't either. And I like rom-coms. I like romance. I like comedy. Old-fashioned movies are fine, but
Especially something with Cary Grant. Oh,
but
yes. We're going to have an affair. Going to be one to remember, I'm sure.
But yeah, I found the premise, the ending premise to be wildly unbelievable. Which I guess you found a lot of Sleepless in Seattle to be wildly unbelievable. Maybe there is more connection there than I thought.
But this movie soothed us, and Affair to Remember sounds like it just makes you angry.
It just made me angry. Yeah. Well, it was another wonderful episode of the podcast here.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope you guys all enjoyed. Yeah.
If you have a good rom-com that you have seen that we haven't mentioned, throw a comment down below. Maybe we'll check it out. You can give us some recommends, or we talk about it some other time.
Yeah, I'm always up for another good rom-com. I got to admit,
Definitely.
there's a lot that I don't enjoy. I hate to sound snobby about it, but I feel like there was a golden age for rom-coms in the 90s to the early 2000s. So if you guys know of any hidden gems in that era or out of that era, I'm up for it.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Yeah, film's got a thumbs up from me. Not a thumbs up from Jesse, I don't think. Is that correct?
Nope. Not. It had to be more entertaining for me.
Okay. Yeah, it's a bit of a slow film. If you're looking for an escapist fantasy with, I think, some decent humor in it, some good, clever jokes, I think you'll get a kick out of this. But it is a little slow and a little ridiculous might be the right word, actually. So
I think if you're relaxing in a bubble bath with a glass of wine and some Kenny G playing, then you could turn this movie on and watch it. Sure.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody, though. Thanks for listening. Yeah, well, did you have a line to take us out here, Jesse?
I think so. Since we've just finished talking about a movie, I will use the words of Patrick Bateman and say, I've got to go return some videotapes.